Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and I want to thank everyone out there for joining us today. I'm so excited to have the CMO of Sprinklr join us today, Grad Conn. Grad, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
So for those of you that aren't familiar with Grad, give us a little bit of your background. Tell us about yourself.
Well, yeah, my title is actually CXMO. I'm the
CXMO.
Chief Experience and Marketing Officer, which is, you're starting to see I think I might be one of the first CXMOs in the world. There's a few people that have experience in their title now, but experience is becoming the new brand. You know, that people buy experiences, and organizations are increasingly understanding the importance of experience in what they do. So that's a lot of what we do at Sprinklr is about experience. And I think experience is something that we can talk about a little bit later as we go through it. You know, my background is pretty simple. I started as a really traditional marketer. Began my career at Procter & Gamble, and sold a lot of soap. Started in the wash cycle with Tide and Bold and Oxydol and Ivory Snow and Dreft and Cheer, and then got promoted to the rinse cycle and started working on Downy fabric softener. So it's all. And then I finally made it to the dryer, which was really awesome. So then I launched Downy Sheets, and then worked on the sheets business, and then actually got out of the laundry room, but not out of the cleaning products. So I was then just general surfactants like light duty liquids and things like that. So did that for about 9 years, had a great time, and then just kind of was feeling a little bit like there's got to be more. And I was as a hobby, I was doing a lot of stuff in Gopher Space and MUDs and BBSs, and I downloaded that first version of the NCSA Mosaic browser and said to my wife, this is it, like this is the thing. And so became a web entrepreneur when no one really knew what web entrepreneurs were, and quit P&G. They thought I was insane, and off I went, and just started just doing startups, mostly bootstrapped on my own. I did 5 over the course of about 12 years.
Oh,
and then
man.
That startup, by the time I finished that, yeah, it was pretty cool. And by the time I finished that, I was like actually pretty technical, and I've become very much a product person as opposed to being a marketer. And then that kind of enabled me to be technical enough to be hired by Microsoft.
There we go.
Yeah, they headhunted me out of my last startup, and where I was CMO, and they brought me into Microsoft Research, where I invented something called Microsoft Health Vault, which was the company's first cloud product. And then did that for about 5 years and spent $1 billion trying to change healthcare, which is needs a few more billions than that. Then I got offered a role as a CMO for Microsoft US and did that for about 7.5 years, and now I'm at Sprinklr.
Wow, what a trajectory from soap to being high tech. That's really cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing your background. So what, was CMO your dream job? Is that what you were kind of targeting all along?
Well, my dream job was to be an astronaut. But that wasn't in the cards.
So the astronaut was just too big to leave?
Yeah, no, I would have loved to be an astronaut. But no, I actually have always been a marketer or in advertising. So, the first book I read was Claude Hopkins' Scientific Advertising. My dad gave it to me when I was 5.
Wow.
And my dad was a madman on Madison Avenue. And it was kind of the thing we all talked about. That's kind of the way we interacted, was talking about advertising. And so I always thought I would do that. My mom really wanted me to be like a doctor. And then if not a doctor, maybe a lawyer. That was kind of and I remember when I told her I was going to business school, it was like I had broken her heart, and she was devastated. But what I did know is that after watching my dad, I did decide that I really didn't want to be pure advertising as much as I wanted to be in marketing.
Mm.
And so it kind of, that was kind of like the concept of marketing versus advertising sort of became a little bit more knowable as you kind of go through school. But I did have this sort of lifelong goal from the time I was a little kid to work at Ogilvy and Mather.
Mm.
And so I actually did apply to Ogilvy and Mather, and I did get a job at Ogilvy and Mather. But I had, at the very last second, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she said, "Hey, why don't you throw in an application to these Procter and Gamble people?" And I was like, they sound kind of like sort of blue suity and sort of, she's just try it. So I submitted it. I didn't even spell Procter and Gamble correctly. It was such a lackadaisical effort, but they also gave me a job offer.
Oh my!
And so I was like, oh, interesting. And as I met them, I thought, well, they're a lot cooler than I thought. And so I actually asked the client services director at Ogilvy what I should do, David Rutherford. I'll never forget his advice. David said, "Hey, listen, you can always come and work at Ogilvy and Mather, but you get one shot to work at Procter and Gamble. Right out of school, that's it. So take that, and then if you don't like it, I'll see you in a couple of years."
I love it.
I was at P&G for a long time. I never went to Ogilvy.
That is so cool. So talk to me about the role today of CMO. What's the most challenging part of it in today's world?
Well, I think the challenging part of the marketing role always has been to prove the value of marketing to the organization. Every CMO I talk to talks about that issue. The new challenge today is that there is a sense that with MarTech and the technologies that are out there, that the value of marketing is knowable. And so there was a time, let's kind of rewind, like say 20 years, where you could talk about brand value, you could talk about brand preference, you could do image surveys, like all this kind of retroactive sort of survey-based sort of feedback, and you could sort of point to indicators that you were doing a good job. Today in marketing, it's like the good job is building pipeline. Like there's a number attached to it. Like the good job is attached straight to revenue. And as a marketing leader, if you can't tell the organization what a dollar spent on marketing turns into, it's difficult to keep your job long term.
Oh, that's fascinating. And now you had talked about a separation of marketing and advertising, but nowadays we almost see a integration of those two between MarTech and ad tech and all this, making your job bigger too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question. Like you are seeing a movement of larger clients, especially, to bring advertising in-house and treat it holistically, and particularly on the modern channels. So we kind of look at the world as there's traditional channels and modern channels, and it's a useful distinction. Just establish it really quick. So traditional channels are everything that was invented in the 20th century. So that would include email and the web, but also phone and
Right.
the magazines and TV and all that kind of stuff. And then sort of the modern communication channels are everything invented in the 21st century, which would be what we typically call social. So that's all the different social platforms. What we're now seeing, maybe even a little bit bigger than social these days, is messaging. There are 10 major messaging platforms. And then there's also all these review sites and blogs and forums, and there's just a lot of places where people are having conversations. And the big difference between the traditional and modern channels is that traditional are typically broadcast. So, small group of marketers send a message out to millions of people, don't really care if they get a response. Whereas modern is conversation.
Yes.
And it's a two-way. And it's very hard to scale the organization you built for the traditional channels to a conversation modality, because in conversations, you can't set robots on people. You've got to actually have conversations with people. And people are now expecting to have one-on-one relationships with their brands. And so in that world, what you're seeing companies do is they're like, I might continue to use my traditional agency model in the traditional channels. And quite frankly, personally, I would recommend that.
Yeah.
Because just buying TV and things like that, those are skill sets I wouldn't want to invest in today in a corporation.
Right.
It's going to be like not necessary skill sets in a very short period of time. But I do need to have like my whole organization essentially involved in customer-facing interaction. because I need a lot more people talking to all these customers. So I've got millions of customers that want to have conversations with me. And so that becomes more of an organizational imperative to bring people into the modern channels. And so what you're seeing people talk about bringing stuff in-house, they're often talking about bringing the conversations in-house, but leave the broadcast external, which I do think is a great model.
Oh, that's so interesting. And that was a great segue into, my next question, which was all about how have you seen marketing evolve over the last decade with digital transformation, all these new technologies, and that's where you are leading us so nicely there, Grad. So how have you seen it change? How has the role of the CMO changed because of digital transformation? All of that.
Well, I'll talk about the role of the CMO, but the mistake we often make in the industry is we talk about our stuff, right? And the thing that's worthwhile understanding is how has the modern customer changed? The only reason that our stuff is changing is because the customer's changing. Got it. And there's this concept I love, which is this concept of Copernican Shift. So if you think about Copernicus, he didn't invent anything. He simply said, I know it looks like the sun is going around the earth, but actually the earth is going around the sun. Yes. And so we, in our sort of product silos, tend to think of the world in terms of what we're doing every day and the people we work with every day. And we think the customers are orbiting around us. But in fact, we're orbiting around the customer, always have been, but we're orbiting around the customers. And the big change is that the modern customer has got a set of tools that gives them a lot more power. So with the rise of the network over the last decade, you have customers now able to elevate brands in ways that were never possible before. You see brands evolving that just come out of these network conversations. Oh, yeah. Also, the ability to punish brands in ways that have never been seen before. Absolutely. And every CMO goes to bed at night worrying about oh my gosh, what's going to happen in the morning, right? Who's going to tweet what? Yeah, who's gonna do something dumb that turns into a firestorm? Yeah. And it's actually interesting. Tom Brokaw made an offhand comment on Meet the Press yesterday. I've been watching Meet the Press for 30 years, and I heard him make the comment. And I was like, that's kind of a weird comment, but you hear lots of weird comments on Meet the Press. Like it's not like because people are just talking, and oh geez, man, that is like turned into a firestorm, right? And that just was not something that happened before. And so this affects brands in really fundamental ways. As well, the modern customer is used to things like, I want instant gratification because I can get it in lots of different places. I want to be able to see the thing I want to buy and get it right away, delivered to the place I want it, when I want it, and I want to know how it's doing along the way. Like all these sort of aspects of sort of modern buying behavior mean that all companies are now being held to the standards of a few. So, Uber created this ability to see where the car was and how long it was going to be before it got to you. Well, now everyone's like, well, why can't I have that for pizza? So Domino's did it, right? Well, why can't I have that for everything? Like, why is that everything not like that? And so they don't think about that's a different category. People just think about that's the way I like to have my life run. And so what that does is it means that you've got these really powerful customers. And so, I've never heard of a company say we don't care about our customers. Everyone's always customers number one, and we love our customers. People have been saying that for decades, right? But now they actually mean it because customers have power they didn't have before. And so this incredible amount of power means that CMOs have got to drive experiences across the org. And where it's really challenging for a CMO is that they don't control every single aspect of the organization that needs to change in order to deliver a great experience. So the CMO finds themselves in a position where they're now collaborating across the org with other groups in order to deliver an experience to help deliver the revenue that the CMO is now responsible for. And so that's where you're starting to hear this customer-centric digital transformation. Absolutely. And now you see a lot of companies are talking about that, or not most companies are talking about it. And so you're seeing the CMO having to collaborate across the org, having to design experiences, and then, importantly, a lot of CMOs are actually taking on the digital transformation initiatives. So a lot of those DT initiatives are being actually led by the CMOs because they're sort of on the dime to deliver the revenue, have the experience perspective, but need to drive a really collaborative cross-organization motion. It's a very super duper interesting time to be in marketing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole notion of experience, you know, it used to be you would have a single transaction with a client and then you'd move on, kind of a once and done thing. But today in a subscription economy,
yep,
you have to renew that, you know, that love between you and the customer on a monthly basis. You have to be caring for them. You have to be knowing how their experience is throughout their entire life cycle. Because if you know, marketing is not just up front. You have to continue to remarket yourself throughout their whole life cycle in order.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I can see how it stopped being just a chief marketing and the experience was added because you have to keep working with that client forever.
Right. There's an expression I've heard recently, which is the sales process starts after the first sale. Right, like the first sale is simply the beginning of that sales process. Now you really got to start selling them, and you got to really land those experiences. And I do think that what's happening is that, you know, despite some negativity that people sort of have in the public sphere, we do live in wonderful times. You know, we're mostly at peace. We're quite prosperous. There's a lot of really awesome things happening for humanity generally around the planet. And what's happening is as people become more prosperous and they move past their basic needs, the things that you now want to spend money on are these experiences, these once in a lifetime, or things to change my life, or things to give me more time, and that becomes where you want to spend your money. And so that's experience economy is just beginning, and that's going to be where almost all of our disposable income is going to go as we kind of proceed down the next few decades. So we're at the very beginning of it.
I see that. You know, my wife and I are super hosts on Airbnb. We have mountain cabins, things like this that we take care of. And I see when you go and you check on your mountain cabins, Airbnb is advertising all these other experiences. You know, you want to do backcountry skiing. Do you want to do this? Do you want to go to here? You know, all those things above and beyond just lodging. Absolutely. So talk to me about Sprinklr. You guys have something called the Social Suite. What I read about you guys is you're super focused on all the various components of social marketing. Talk to us about, you know, what you got there.
Yeah, so you know, I've talked a lot about the modern customer. I've talked a lot about traditional modern channels. So what's also happening in computing right now is that over the last 30 years, maybe 40 years, almost all the attention in compute has been on the back office. So there's been a tremendous amount of investment in warehousing systems and inventory systems and purchasing systems and production systems and accounting systems, all that kind of stuff. And we're at a point now where most companies are like, they can always be better and they'll keep investing there, but they kind of got it mostly figured out. Yes. And the core of that has been creating common product IDs, which SAP did. And SAP really was the leader in creating a common product ID and then building out that entire ERP system and CRM systems around it. So that's been an amazing, amazing achievement, I think. Yes. And that back office is, you know, a big business. Where everyone's kind of turning their attention now is what's called the front office. And the front office is the collection of marketing systems and sales systems, care systems, anything that's customer facing and customer touching. And when you look over there, it's like we were all focused on the back office, right? Getting things all tidied up there. Then you kind of say, oh, what's going on in the front office? I'm just kind of open the door here, just take a quick little peek here. It's like, whoa, what is going on, right? And basically marketers have been like kind of running wild. The average marketing department today's got 91-point solutions. Yikes. 91-point solutions means 91 RFPs, 91 UIs, 91 databases, 91 customer IDs. It's a huge problem. We'll come back to that. And 91 times 91 integrations. Yes. Which obviously you're not going to do that many integrations, so you have a not fully integrated system. Yeah. And so what people are doing is they're saying, well, we need a common customer ID in the front office in order to be able to have a cohesive experience against the customer. Like, how am I going to know how to talk to the customer, treat the customer, if I don't know all the interactions that they've had with me? Right? We've all had that experience, right? Where
yeah, absolutely.
You go into a store and they greet you as a stranger. And you're like, I'm in here every week. You know, like why? Or you go on to a hotel or an airline where if you're loyal, but they don't know that about you, you feel like betrayed because you've been giving them your loyalty, but they haven't been giving you theirs. And that's often just because of disconnected systems. Or that thing when you're trying to get customer service and you have to repeat your problem over and over. It's like it's infuriating. And as people start to fix that, all companies will be held to a standard of knowing everything about you. And so where the opportunity we believe is that taking those 90-point solutions and unifying them into a front office system that's way more coalesced is really the opportunity. And for us, we are the unifier of the modern channels.
And modern channels, what do you define those as?
Everything invented in the 21st century.
Okay, got it.
Channels, all the messaging channels, reviews, blog. There's like 350 million blogs and review sites, that kind of stuff. And so if you took a look at a really well-structured reference architecture for a front office, you would need a web system, like something that Adobe has, right? And that kind of some creative stuff. You'd need a CRM system like Dynamics. You would need some kind of marketing automation email system like Marketo. You're going to need sort of a back office system like SAP, a productivity suite like Office, an infrastructure layer like Azure, and then you're going to need something to deal with the modern channels, and that would be Sprinklr.
Got it.
And so, in fact, those particular players, SAP, Adobe, and Microsoft, have just formed something called the Open Data Initiative. And the ODI Alliance is actually going to create a common customer ID in an Azure data lake that they'll all write to, and we'll be part of that as well. And so what will happen is that as a company, I can now have a common customer ID, and I don't have one application for my whole front office because that's not super realistic, but I've got 5 to 6 strategic platforms that are tightly connected all to ODI. And now I can actually have a really cohesive conversation with my customer, whether I'm on traditional channels using Marketo and tools like that, or on modern channels using Sprinklr.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. That was very, very well said and articulated. I think it gives us a really good vision of the components that make up a modern marketing environment. So let's move on and talk to us about a few concepts here. What does the word amplification mean to you?
Well, amplification is often used as a way to say advertising on modern channels.
Okay.
And so there are two concepts there, and basically in our products. So we have 5 products on Sprinklr. So the way Sprinklr is built, just really quick, is it's a single global instance for each customer. Now, even if the customer is paying us from multiple business groups, they're on one single global instance, which is unique amongst SaaS players. And then we have 5 products. One is a social suite, which is sort of where we started. Then we have an advertising product. We have a care product. We have a content marketing product. And then we have our newest product is called Sprinklr Experience, which is a way of measuring and then reacting to experiences that customers are having. So those are the 5 products that comprise our sort of product suite. In the social suite, there is this product, a feature called Social Ad Boost. And as most people know, true organic has kind of gone away. You know, less than 0.25% of your followers will see any post you just put on your site organically. So in order to get any kind of motion on a post, you got to put a little bit of money behind it. It doesn't need to be $1 billion though. I mean, you can put $200. And so Google's actually done a lot of really good work here. Globally, they've sort of built out a system in Sprinklr where they can put little bits of money behind these posts and make them. That's one form of amplification. The more sort of serious one is that money is moving from the traditional channels to the modern channels. Because that's where customers are. Not that surprising. And so as that money moves in, you've got to have an ad buying product that enables you to buy cross-channel, cross-geography, and then optimize in real time, because they're a much more complex buying scenario than just buying, the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And so that's our ad product. Is pretty mature. I was the first user of it many years ago at Microsoft, but that's a product that's now a lot of agencies are actually co-selling it with us. Havas in Europe, and then VML Y&R in North America. So it's and the agencies love it because it allows them to create a lot of value for their customers. And it's just not possible to natively log in to the platforms and optimize cross channels in a constructive way.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. So you had said earlier, Grad, that what you want to do is not just stick robots out after people to market, but really you want to encourage conversation with customers out there. But how are you seeing artificial intelligence and chatbots and automation actually being deployed to help with that?
Yeah. Well, AI is critical to make it happen, but it's as an aid, not as a first-line conversationer, mm-hmm. right? I don't know if a conversationer is a real word, but I'm gonna trademark that and say it is. And so, kind of like it. Anyway, so the way to kind of one thing I find useful to think about is there are 4 billion people online now. 3.5 billion people on social platforms, 3 billion people with smartphones. That's a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
And just as an example of scale, that number of people, they're generating 50 billion messages a day on the messaging platforms. Think about it, 50 billion a day, and there's hundreds of billions of conversations and messages going on out there. And so the first thing you have to do as a company is you've got to get your arms wrapped around all those conversations that are happening, because many of them are talking about you.
Yes.
So you essentially you have to build a giant haystack, right? You got a giant haystack of all this stuff, and Sprinklr is the best haystack builder according to Forrester, according to multiple sort of reviews, according to our customers. And we spent a lot of time making sure that with AI we can find contextually mentions of the company, not just like a lot of systems will just look for the at mentions or hashtags. That's fine, but very rarely do customers actually use those. They'll say, hey, why isn't Windows working on my computer? They don't go hashtag Windows, or they don't go at Windows. They just say what's going on. But they also say, I need to clean the windows in my office. And, both Office and Windows are products of Microsoft, but cleaning the windows in your office has got nothing to do with Microsoft.
Yes.
You've got to have AI that can kind of look at the context and understand that cleaning the windows in the office is not a message that you need to read at Microsoft. And why isn't Windows working on my computer is a message you need to read at Microsoft, right? Not that Windows would ever not work, but that, just a theoretical example. Yeah. And so being able to find that, and what we kind of think about it is we're this haystack builder, so we want to have everything, and then we're a really awesome needle finder. So we can find those little needles in the haystack that are relevant to you, because if I force you to read through all the hay, then it's just too much noise, and you're not going to be able to get to the core of it. So we're really great at pulling those needles out. Now, once you have the needles, then what are you going to do with them? That's where AI also comes into play. Because AI is let's sort this out. Because I can also just pull everything that's relevant to you in, but some of those are going to be care messages. Probably a different group needs to look at those. Some are going to be detractors, need to be dealt with a certain way. Some of those are going to be fans who need to be dealt with a certain way. Some are going to be requests for information, I want to buy something, or I want to buy more of something, or how do I change my subscription, or whatever. And so all those messages are going to different teams and groups, and AI helps sort and essentially automate the moderation so that can be dealt with more easily.
Brilliant. Thank you for giving us that behind-the-scenes view. That's fascinating to me. That's worth a whole nother conversation at another time, Grad. Now, let's talk about those customers, those wonderful customers that we all need to be focused on and orbit around. How are you seeing customers' kind of content consumption patterns changing nowadays? How have they evolved over the past 5 years? Are they wanting more of some things and less of others? How do you see it changing?
Yeah, well, there's some tactical stuff that I'll share that's very interesting. I have this sort of running theory that all things degrade to TV. So once a channel can actually handle video starts to become really, really important. You're seeing video becoming dominant on all the channels. You're seeing captioned video being really important.
Yeah.
Because people watch it without sound. So if you don't caption your videos, you're not really, unless their videos are just sunsets, you're not really getting the value out of them. In fact, it's the captioning has become so dominant that a lot of millennials and younger, the Generation Zs, I guess, they actually will watch live TV with sound and with captions.
Interesting.
Yeah, like my youngest daughter watches everything with captions on. Drives me like bananas. But she doesn't. She's gotten so trained to like see captions with video that she finds she gets less information somehow when she's just watching without captions. And so those are the kinds of things that are very tactically kind of happening. And you're seeing people, tell stories. The story piece has become really important. I think. I think WhatsApp is going to generate this year. Let me make sure I got the number right. Yep. WhatsApp is going to generate this year 500 million stories. And Instagram says they're on track to do about 350 million stories. Amazing. These are amazing numbers, right? And these are long content, people telling their stories. And what you're seeing is, I think, that fundamentally humans are social animals. And fundamentally, we want to tell our story. We want to be heard. It's very important for humans to feel like they mattered, that they made a difference, that this time on the planet wasn't wasted, that I had something to say that was of value. And so, we're unlocking and democratizing this technology that allows everyone to have a voice and all to interact and talk to each other. The other thing we're also seeing make a really interesting comeback are podcasts. And that's being driven by some technology changes in the cars. They're making it easier to plug in your phone and then listen to podcasts on the way to work for if you have a commute, and also just people exercising in devices and Apple Watches and all that kind of stuff. Podcasts have made this amazing comeback. They kind of pronounced dead about 5 or 6 years ago, and now their podcasts are huge. And then the last thing is long form content. You're seeing long form content become really dominant again, or people want to read really long articles and really dig into something. And so we're actually starting to produce some very long form content at Sprinklr to tell our story. We've got like a 20-minute sort of origins video. We're doing sort of long books about it. So those are all kind of interesting trends in the channels.
That is fascinating to me. I see all those same things in my life. I was laying on the couch yesterday. My wife is reading. I had captions on the show I was watching. It was an outdoor show, and with a narrator, and so I'm just listening to the captions so it doesn't disturb everybody else. So I saw that. Every time I take a trip back and forth to the mountains, we're listening to podcasts. So I see everything you're talking about there. Absolutely. And now, I never get on a plane without a bunch of downloaded videos, mostly, like documentary types on wilderness and hikes and things like that. But I'm always doing it. So everything you're talking about there, I'm seeing it in my own life too.
Well, I think part of what you're describing is that we've all gotten really used to curating our own network, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what's going on too, is that, I want to watch certain things I want to watch. And so I'm not going to be, beholden to someone else's tastes or desires. I'm going to build the thing I want to see and when I want to see it. And the more that you start doing that, the more you get used to it. It's very hard to go back.
Oh, absolutely. So, Grad, what's your advice to, let's say, a marketer who just graduated from school, just starting their career in marketing? What advice would you give them on what skills should they be investing in to be prepared for the changes that will happen over the next 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that question a lot, I think about my own career. I got to a point of a pretty high level of craft at Procter & Gamble, but could not see a way to get my way to a company like Microsoft. And so the way I did it is I essentially self-taught myself. So as I told you, I quit, started all over, bootstrap my way through it. It was not necessarily a process I would recommend to others. I wouldn't want my own children to go through it. So let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I got really technical by the end of it. And so the advice that I give people is that to be a marketer today means that you are both technical and creative. It's an unusual blend. But if you don't feel that you can be technical, or if you don't want to be technical, then you should, as rapidly as possible, find another profession.
Very good.
It's just, you're not going to be able to work in this field if you're not able to do that. And so that ability to have both sides operating at the same time is actually, when you're in that zone, it is very, very fun, because programming and sort of a lot of the technical aspects of creating experiences is a very creative exercise, and then you've got sort of just pure creative exercises, but you've got to have both of those. And so I think that marketers are going to be tasked with this whole brain approach to business that'll put a lot of pressure on them. But make sure that you've got the strongest possible technical skills and always be learning. And when I hire, I don't hire for skills. I think skills are great, but the problem is that skills outdate really quickly. Mm-hmm. I hire two ways. I hire for attitude. So I want people who've got a really great attitude, show up with a ability to be part of the team, and energy and enthusiasm. And the second thing I hire for is ability to learn. I want lifelong learners, people who are always learning, always trying new things. My mom is, I'm not sure she'd want me to say this, but I'll say it anyway. So my mom's 78, and she's like a super lifelong learner. Like she epitomizes it for me. She'll call me up with telling me stuff about something new that Google just did in Google Docs, and I'll ask her questions like, how did you do this? Because all this stuff's so complicated. You have to ask people. And she's like all on it, right? And so she's just always learning. And for me, that's the key. If you've got enthusiasm and energy and an ability to learn, you'll be fine in marketing as long as you keep doing that and keep learning. I always say I always want my last words. My book said this many times, but my last words to be, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Not as you're describing, the light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
I didn't realize that. Parallel universes. Well, Grad, this has been fascinating discussions. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experiences, your life with all of us that tuned in today.
Great. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yep. And so Sprinklr, and that's Sprinkler, right?
Yeah, it's Sprinklr without the E, because we couldn't afford it.
Yeah. I know there's probably a story behind that too. We'll catch that for another time. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool.